Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to Better Together. It is Thursday, June 11th, 2020. Hope you guys are doing well wherever you are in this world. Our quote of the day: the very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being. And that is Toni Morrison. We have a really great show for you guys today. Very excited to have on two people. One is one of our very own AfterBuzz host, writer, social activist, James Maple is going to be co-hosting with me today. So welcome to the show, James.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
And also our guest today, we're featuring social scientist and two-time author Candis Watts Smith. And she is going to help us understand the language and the goals of the Black Lives Movement, Black Lives Matter movement. And we're going to kind of ask her to help us understand a lot of things, the defunding of police, all of the things that you may have been hearing about and forming opinions on without even knowing what it means. I've had to stop people in their tracks along the way, because the first instinct is fear, right? And then you realize, well, if a lot of people are saying we should do this, maybe there's something there we're not understanding. And so today we're going to better understand it, because I don't think you can have an opinion until you know what it is and what everyone's asking for. And so we are going to have those conversations here today so that we can have a better understanding, and then you can make your decisions from there, because this is what our country is founded on. It's like freedom of, your voice, your choice, whatever. You can make your own decisions from there, but I don't believe it's fair for any of us to make decisions or have opinions until we actually understand what people are asking for. And so, James, we will start with you. Before we get into all the good stuff that we really want to hear about, you've been on the ground, you've been writing, you've been so brave in sharing your stories, and I want to get to all of them. But guys, we have lived in crisis in 2020, okay? And there's a new one upon us. So let me share the gloom.
No.
Guys, there is a mosquito-borne disease. Okay? 38 confirmed cases, 15 deaths. Northeast Massachusetts saw 12 cases. Okay? Global warming is apparently the primary cause, and it is a deadly mosquito disease that is on the rise. I saw that on Twitter yesterday. I'm really trying to take down my Twitter time, because I realized my phone, I went up like 3 hours a day in consumption on my phone in the last few weeks. And I need to go back to where I was. I was much more zen then. And so anyhow, I saw that and I was like, oh man, I mean, come on.
2020. I told you, Marie, in the interest of honesty, that's what we do on this show. My knee-jerk reaction was to laugh when I saw this.
I know.
It's just like, of course the deadly mosquito disease in the Northeast is skyrocketing.
Wait, can we show James the shark seagull, please?
Yes, give me one
Oh,
moment.
gosh.
Okay, so James, a friend of mine texted me this. This was like a few weeks ago, and he was like, I mean, did you hear about the new shark seagulls? Like, they're taking over. And so,
Shark seagulls?
Oh yeah, it's real.
They're
real.
evolving?
It's the next killer. I mean, we had.
Wow.
Can you see it?
Yes. Unfortunately, it looks like what nightmares are made of.
Oh yes, it just looks so good. It's so creepy, but yeah. So just for a little levity, I thought I would share with you guys that, shit's just getting crazier and crazier. And then I was walking by and the news was on yesterday, and I heard coronavirus cases on the rise in California. And we're like, oh, for the love of God.
I know, and it's also the fear of that this might distract from the important messaging that's happening on the ground right now, too. It's like, it's like 2020 needs to figure out what its goals are. It's like there's so much.
What was 2020's word when it did that exercise? Is it bold?
Maybe.
I don't know. That was my word for the year. But I think, I feel like we are living in a time where we're realizing a lot of systems haven't been really working. And we need to just, and it's like an overhaul. Like yesterday with James, we were talking about like, when you're cleaning and organizing your house, like take it small step by step so that it's not overwhelming. I think we are in that moment where it's like, no, we got to redo everything all at once. Like there's so much. But James, I have to say, you started a series called I Love You, James. And I want to know why you started it. And is it all primarily on your Instagram?
Yes. So it's all on my Instagram, like you just noted. The series itself kind of started out of a place of therapy for me. I've been protesting in Los Angeles for the past, for 8 days straight. And I mean that literally. I would go home, wake up in the morning, find a protest, and attend for 8 days in a row. And it got to a point where I became so emotionally drained. There's, I think the third day into it, I tweeted and said, I've cried more in the last 3 days than I have in the last 3 decades. And I meant that. It took such an emotional toll on me. And hosting has always been a therapeutic thing for me. So I was like, let me try to find another outlet to really talk to people and really tell them how I'm feeling and really share a part of myself. And that's where that series came from. The initial thought process behind it was, I think it was the day of the Blackout Tuesday, I believe it was, where we took that Tuesday to black out our Instagram and really show solidarity. And I wanted people to take that day to show solidarity, but also think about their actions. Think about the things that they have done and how they can use the power that they have for good. So I wrote that and I ended my little blurb with, I love you, James. So I thought that was such a good, positive message. And I got so much great feedback from my followers and my fans. I thought to myself, let's keep this going. Let's every day when I go out, let me let you into my life. Let me let you into the nuances of racism that I experience, the nuances of protests that you may not see on the news, the love, the camaraderie, the just passion in people that you don't see very often. So it was my point, it was my drive. And it's strange because it was innate. I didn't have to think twice about it. It just felt like the right thing to do. And as tired as I was and as exhausted as I was, I looked forward to that night after the protest where I would sit down for an hour and a half and think to myself, what was the lesson I learned today? Because I knew that the lesson I learned being on the field could be bestowed to other people as well who couldn't, protest in the way that I chose to protest myself.
Yeah, I saw your prom experience.
Yes.
Your prom, how old are you now?
I'm 33.
You're 33. So your prom was what year?
I graduated high school 2005. So I want to say this was my junior prom. So
2004?
3-ish, somewhere in there, I'd say.
So, and where did you grow up?
In DC.
Okay. The fact that in 2004, and if you can, do you have a minute to read this? Like, do you have it in front of you?
Yeah,
I would
I'd
love for you to
love
read this out loud for people, because what I think is so important, I'm gonna cry. I think it's so important for these stories to come forward because we don't know.
Right.
And I would never think that in 2004, someone would actually say this out loud to someone on their prom day. Like it wasn't even something that was said 2 weeks ago, which is not excusable. I'm just saying, like, now you're in the moment and someone just crushes you in that moment. It doesn't make it any better or any worse if it happened 2 weeks ago. I'm not saying that. They waited till then. And so I want you to read it so that everyone can hear what a young man's experience was in the 2000s.
Right. So before I read this, I do want to let you all know I'm going to say a word that I don't use often myself, but I think in this instance, it is important to say these words to confront our discomfort. So I'm going to say the N word, and I'm going to say exactly what was said to me, because as I grapple with this every single day, I'm reminded of that word. It's not censored in my head. It said it's direct to me. So I can only honor that story and honor myself by saying directly to you. So prepare yourself. I will be saying the N-word in this. So, quote, when I was 16 years old, I asked Jen W to the prom. She is white. Like any teenage boy, I was nervous and scared of what she might say. Luckily, she said yes. I, of course, was over the moon. I really felt like a man, that I did a grown-up thing. We made sure to coordinate our colors. We made a playlist for the night. Everything was seemingly great. The night of prom, I borrowed my mom's car and headed over to Jen's parents' house to pick her up and take pictures, and that's where things changed. I was told by her family that they were going to need to reconsider. In the words of her grandmother, quote, I refuse to see my granddaughter go to the prom with a nigger. She told me that to my face in front of Jen's entire family. They all did nothing, presumably because they agreed with her. I felt humiliated. I felt worthless. I was dehumanized. My amazing mother did her best to protect me from racism. But in this instance, there was nothing my mother could do. This was out of her control. I've carried the words of Jen's grandmother with me to this very day, and I have cried many times because of them. Now, I share this story, this personal story, because I want you all to understand that behind our smiles, there is often pain. There is humiliation. There is dehumanization. The Black experience in this country is like no other. We are not okay. I am not okay. Being Black, while beautiful, is incredibly painful. Check in with your Black friends, because I guarantee they're holding back hurt and humiliation because they have to. Lastly, do not check in with me now. It will feel contrived and rooted in guilt. Just please, for the sake of our next generation, do better. Be better.
I thought that was so beautiful that you shared that. I am watching Jeff hysterically losing it. I don't know if you can see him, but he's clearly moved. So Jeff, tell me what you think when you hear that. And I know you've read it before.
Yeah. I mean, obviously all of us are emotionally exhausted right now, but I think what's so important about what you're doing, James, is it's creating a level of personhood to racism. I feel very convicted because I feel like, as someone who grew up in a primarily white community, and I like to think of myself as someone who's pretty socially conscious and hopefully progressive, but at the same time, when you're taught about racism, it's not the same as knowing someone who's been like very deeply impacted by it. And even my close friends of color, I wish I would have engaged them more on hearing the personal stories of racism that they face, because at least for me, I feel like that's been a hugely important part of my growth and recognition of how toxic of a problem this is in our country.
And you know, Jeff, I found that to be the most effective method to combat this. Really making people understand, because, you know, I know we all grow up in our own households, in seemingly our own world. But when you can relate your experience to someone, and you can tailor the lines to be within their line of sight, it really does hit people differently. And like I said in the post, it's not easy. And I feel like oftentimes, you know, behind this TV host smile, there is pain, there is hurt. So, you know, just because we have this front and because we walk around so proudly, we have to. I don't have a choice but to. So I can only, you know, share my story. And again, to circle back to your original question, Maria, this is the kind of the purpose of my series, I Love You, James. This is a perfect example of it. Because had I not told that story, I don't think people would understand the impact of racism and how it affects me. You know, we're all online all the time, and we always show the best of ourselves, and we hide the worst. Sometimes showing the worst of yourself can bring out the best in others. And I think that me sharing my story, sharing my struggle, really highlighting aspects of my own life that have changed me to make me the man that I am today, and really fuel the fire and the passion that I have to fight for others, it needs to be highlighted. And like as I prefaced my little blurb there, I know that in moments of discomfort, it can make you feel icky. But if we have to have a 45-minute conversation and littered with uncomfortability, then so be it. Because that conversation can lead to saved lives. That conversation can lead to further conversations. Mm-hmm. That conversation can lead to to revolution and genuine change in this country. So it's incumbent upon us as a people, as Black people, as white people, as all people, to be uncomfortable. It's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be upset. If you weren't upset, if you weren't crying, I would be more concerned, because to me, you're lacking empathy.
Yeah.
So let's be uncomfortable. Let's step outside of ourselves. Say, I'm not advocating this, but if you have to say the N-word in an example, then say it. Say it to prove your point. Make people feel uncomfortable, because if we don't, we will continue to ride the same disgusting path we're on. It's our silence that have put us in the place that we're in the place that we are. Speaking up is the only way to change that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's so important for everybody to speak up, but I think across kind of issues, like you saw the Me Too movement, women were silent because they felt like they had to, because you would, be, ruined in this business. And so I think silence is difficult, right? It can get you through for a little bit, but it just makes it worse later.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyhow, I have to say, I didn't know the story you told me earlier, about Hollywood Papa. I didn't realize that your parents didn't want you out there protesting. So please tell us the story, because I want to understand why your parents didn't want you to protest and why they felt better knowing Kevin was going to be there.
Yeah.
I thought that was cute.
So as I noted, I did protest 8 days in a row. And these protests, ranged in size from the latest being 50,000 to as small as 50 people, literally. But I made a point to get out there every single day. And the sensationalization of the protests in the media really, as any parent would, my parents became incredibly concerned. I got text messages and phone calls from my mom, from my dad. Again, I'm 33 years old. I'm a grown man, but mom calls and you answer. So
and you're still that kid when mom calls.
I'll always be. Hi, Mom. I know you're out there watching. I love you. So my mom texted me one day and said to me, "Where are you? I think I just saw you on CNN." And I was like, "Oh, well, I'm certainly not protesting. Wait, I'm on TV." And she's like, "Get your behind in the house right now." So the following day, so I want to just let everyone know, CNN snitched me out to my mom. I just want to put that out there as well. So the following day, my mom became very concerned. So I made a point. Actually, a fellow AfterBuzz TV host and one of your fellow co-hosts from this week, Sanaa Moore. Hey, Sanaa out there as well. We protested the following day, and we made a point to create a text thread between myself, Sanaa's mom, my mom, and Kevin. And Kevin's first response to our parents was, I want you all to know that, my parents are in DC, Sanaa's parents are in Chicago. Kevin let them know firsthand, if anything happens to the kids, I am but a car ride away. They will be okay. So Hollywood Papa had our back for sure. So my parents were rest assured, and Sanaa's parents were rest assured that we had another set of eyes, parental eyes looking on us as we protest in these streets.
I love it. I didn't realize the thread was there. I just knew that he had told all of you guys, listen, if you need help, let me know. And I do know that he had a very long conversation with Sanaa's mom one night when she was worried. And he was like, she was so great. Sanaa was so worried, but she was so great. But yeah, I think, I wonder, I didn't expect that your parents wouldn't want you out there, but at the same time, again, you're right. They're parents and they're nervous and they're scared. But where are we at with the protests now? Are there protests still happening in the LA? Because I've been wondering.
Absolutely. To be very honest with you, I'm missing one that's happening right now to do the show.
Oh.
I go to protests every single day. There are protests every single day. And I also want to hit home the notion that the way that I fight this movement is just the way that I fight this movement. Mm-hmm. Please, everyone know that you don't have to stand beside me to stand with me. There are people even at this protest who don't, before I go any further, we have to keep in mind too, there's a global pandemic happening right now. I understand people's fear for their own personal safety. Mm-hmm. And it's a risk that I am willing to take for my cause and for my people in this movement. But there are ways you can protest and help our movement in so many ways that you don't have to put your life at risk. If you feel the need to come out, I can't tell you how much of a blessing it was to have people in their cars on the sidelines passing out hand sanitizer. Why don't you have a mask on? Here's an extra mask. Passing out snacks and Gatorade, and you can make donations from the comfort of your own home. There's so many ways for you to help out. Our friends who are artists who've made paintings and drawings and sang songs and written poems. So just keep in mind, there are so many outlets for you to have your voice heard where it won't require your legs.
I love that. I love that. Well, James, I think we should get to our guest. I'm very excited to chat with Candis Watts Smith. She is a celebrated social scientist and author whose work focuses on systemic racial injustice in our country. She's the author of 2 frequently taught books on the subject of race. Her TED Talk on racism has been cited by a number of online publications. She joins us today to help us unpack this historical moment in our country and to help us on our journey to becoming better allies. Candis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And meet my friend James here, who is co-hosting with me today.
Hi, James.
Hi, Dr. Smith. It is wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much. I've been reading up on you the past couple of days, and I've been so inspired. So thank you for joining us for this discussion.
Thank you for saying that. And thanks for having me, Maria. I appreciate it.
Of course. I had told Jeff, our producer, I said, Jeff, I need you to find me someone that can help this show be a place where people can go and get the answers to things that they aren't even maybe seeking, or the things that they do need to know more of. Like, for example, I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and people still don't know how to refer to Black people. And so there are people, I think it was like Twitch, who said people of color. And then I heard that was then denounced, then, African American and Black. And, the hard thing is everyone's scared to have these conversations. And so maybe we start there because I feel like that's something that a lot of people need help with. So
I think first of all, I think it's funny how you describe your show. It kind of reminds me of Instagram, and you're like scrolling through and you're like, I didn't even know I needed that. And then if you do, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, to answer your question, I think, and maybe James has something to say about it too, is I think part of the anxiety comes from this idea that a lot of us grew up thinking that talking about race makes you a racist. And so then when you want to talk about race, you don't know what the right words are, and it's awkward. But to the question, Black, African American, I think these labels have changed over time, and they're going to change again. So African American was kind of a term that came out of Jesse Jackson actually was a proponent of calling Black people African American to give them a sense of rootedness. So Italian Americans and German Americans and everyone else had a place except Black folks. And so he thought that maybe African American would be a good word. I think now more people are just saying Black because there are African immigrants, there are Caribbean immigrants, there are Afro-Latinos who are coming to the US, and African American is probably not the best descriptor of all of those kinds of people. I think people are kind of settling on Black. I don't know.
Okay. Is people of color or person of color negative?
No. So the thing about, I think what people are getting antsy about is that sometimes you say, well, people of color are treated poorly, but do you mean Black people? Because if you mean Black people, then just say Black people. The people of color thing is a way that it's the same kind of rhetorical device when we say ethnicity instead of race. So if you just want to say Black people, just say Black people. If you're talking about Latinos or Latinx communities, say that. If you're talking about Asian Americans, say that. And then sometimes you mean all of those groups, right? All of the groups that are not considered white, people of color.
There we go. And now you know. And when you
And
know
now
better,
know.
you get better. And that's what we do here. I want to talk about Black Lives Matter. So I remember when I posted Black Lives Matter, and this was pretty early on, and, I lost followers and got a lot of heat from people, and I was like, whatever. And I usually don't respond to trolls because I just feel like, why would I even engage in them? But with this, I really felt compelled to like get them to see another side. I'm like, do you understand what it's like to get in a car and to have to worry every day of what could happen to you? Like, think about this. And so having Black friends and knowing that that's a real thing, I get it. And so some of the followers that were coming at me, and they're like, well, all lives matter. And it was kind of insane to me because I'm like, wait, guys, yes, of course, like all lives matter. We understand that. But like, you see something major is happening here. Someone was murdered. And so that's why we're saying Black Lives Matter, because it doesn't appear to have really mattered when it keeps happening, right? So then I saw really beautiful posts where people are like, well, of course all lives matter. And like they had the whole explanation because people have to spell it out, unfortunately. So for people who still don't understand, please explain Black Lives Matter.
So I think it's important just to say it's a statement of fact, right? Black Lives Matter. So a student of mine gave me this analogy, which I think is a good one. So imagine that you're walking down the street and there's a building on fire. All the buildings matter, but the one that's burning is the one that you should think about dealing with right then and there. And if you don't deal with the fire in that building, it's going to spread to all the other buildings. And so Black Lives Matter is a way to say Black lives must matter in order for us to say and mean it that all lives matter. Right. So I think that this
good way to say it. Yep.
What's that?
I love that. Yeah. You're right.
Yes.
How can you say all lives matter if they don't?
Yeah, right. And so I think, there's this idea that all lives matter is like, it's universal. And so we should all be included. But we have little evidence that Black lives matter. So that we have little evidence that claim is real. And so you just kind of have to assert it, Black Lives Matter, in order for all lives to matter. So it's actually an effort to be universal, right? In order for us to say that all lives matter, we have to ensure that Black lives matter. In order for all the buildings to matter, we have to ensure that we're taking care of this burning one.
James, do you have anything to add to that?
Actually, I have a question for you, Dr. Smith. I was been reading up quite a bit on you, and one thing that stood out to me was your TED Talk, and it was interesting because what you said stood out to me. And as I scrolled down to the comments, the first comment I said was what I was thinking, and it's this: you say the first thing we need to do is come to a shared understanding of what racism is. Now, I thought that was such a profound statement because there's such a level of ambiguity when it comes to solving this problem. And I think that the underlying issue is first identifying the problem. So I was hoping you could elaborate a bit more on that statement about how we need to come to a shared understanding of the definition of racism.
Yeah, sure. So first, call me Candis.
Okay. Yes.
So I think that sometimes we're talking over each other. We're using the same words to mean different things. And we can't really think about any other situation where if you're talking about apples and I'm talking about bananas, but we're both calling it oranges, it's gonna get all jacked up, right? And so I think that one of the things that we see a lot of is people are using this word to mean totally different things. Some people are using this word in a very narrow way to say, oh, it's kind of like what my grandma says when she, doesn't like that her granddaughter is dating a Black kid or something like that. it's very overt. It's quite clear. You don't like someone because of the color of their skin or their racial group. But if we think about it, then there's some other people who are talking about systemic racism, and they're talking about policies, laws, patterns, biases. Well, if you're just trying to get rid of all the grandmas in Mississippi and you think that racism is going to go away, then we're going to have a different conversation. And you're also going to have a different set of policy. You're going to have a different set of solutions. So some people are going to say, oh, well, let's work on hearts and minds. And some people are going to say, let's work on policies and laws, right? And so I think that both of these ways of thinking about racism is right, but sometimes we mostly just see the hearts and minds one and not also the systems, laws, institutions, rules, norms, even just kind of the way we live our everyday lives, right? That we live our lives in very segregated ways. So we have to kind of come together to realize that it's both of these sets of things that we need to figure out how to deal with.
Can you define racism?
Sure. I would say I think it's important to think about structural racism. And I would say racism, let's say this. Racism is, I think, rooted in prejudice, right? We can think of someone in our family who just doesn't like people because of the color of their skin. We would count that as racist. Then we could also think about racism in terms of maybe providing benefits and advantages to some groups because of their race, and disadvantages and burdens to other people because of their race. So we can kind of think about things in our day-to-day basis, our day-to-day living, segregation in schools, right? Most of us in America, and it's really strange. I asked my students, they were born in 2000, right? Like, it's weird to have kids born in the 21st century as college students. But I asked them, did you go to a school where most of the people in your class were of the same race? And most of them say yes, right? And so that is because we have segregated housing, and then we go to segregated schools, and we have segregated opportunities. And, that leads to differences in incomes, which leads to differences in health outcomes, which leads to differences. We can go on and on and on. And so that whole system of advantages and disadvantages that kind of accumulate on each other, we can call that racism.
And you say that people can do racist things, but not actually be racist. So can you kind of unpack that for us?
Yeah, I think that it's lazy to say you're a racist, you're not a racist. I think that's lazy because that puts a lot of people off the hook, right? I think it's probably more productive to say that you have participated in producing inequalities, and you haven't participated. And one person can do both of those things, right? So you, for example, can, you can donate to the Black Mamas Bail Fund, right? That would be a thing that, kind of undoes an institution that punishes poor people for being poor, right? They haven't been convicted of a crime, but they're in jail because they can't afford to get out. And we know that happens disproportionately to Black folks than to other folks, right? So you can do that. And then you can also vote for a policy that, say, restricts people's access to voting.
You cut out right there. Restricts access to what?
Voting.
Oh, got it.
So you can do both of those things, right? And so one is one that tries to ameliorate racial inequalities, and the other is a thing that can reproduce inequalities. But the same person can do that, both of those things. So I think that it's important for us to figure out, what actions are we doing that are helping, and what actions are we doing that are hurting?
Got it. How does someone take stock of all of these things, right? Because I imagine, like, voting, that happens every, 4 years, or in the In the other elections, it's what, every 2 years. So you might not even realize in that moment, like if you were to sit down and do the homework today, okay, where are my holes that I need to really like look at? Like, where are the things where I need to get better? You might not remember that, but what are the other areas that someone could examine, perhaps?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question. It's like, what's your racial footprint or something like that?
Yeah.
Maria, I think that's a hard question because we all make 1,000 decisions a day, right? I'm going to shop at this grocery store, not that grocery store. I'm going to put my money at this bank, not that bank. I'm going to send my kid to this school, not that school. And so I think that in each of these choices, some are more obvious than others, that you could make a different choice that would lead to greater equity. So for example, you might want to choose a store that pays its workers a fair wage versus one that doesn't. Maybe it's cheaper, but it's not paying their employees a fair wage. Or, maybe you have a choice that you can put your money in this big bank, or you could put it in this co-op that might support small businesses or provide loans to low income folks or something like that. So I think that because racial inequality is embedded in almost every domain of American life, we could probably think about each of the ways that we participate in society and see some things that we could do better.
Candis, I have to piggyback on that. I think that you rose a good point in your book. You wrote specifically that the ratio of white people to black friends and black people to white friends.
Mm-hmm.
I think the underlying current in this is communication. I think expanding your horizons and inviting people into your circle and into your psyche is a great step to understanding the perhaps the subtle acts of racism that people do every day. So I think that when I was reading excerpts from your book, that was the first thing that stood out to me, was that you actually give us a diagram. It's one thing to say the words, but it's a whole other thing to see it, to see those figures in front of you, and you're just taken aback at, wow, this is an experience that I don't get often. So I think, again, that undercurrent to at least addressing some of the subtle acts of racism that people do, and with unbeknownst to themselves, is opening that dialogue, inviting people in who don't look like you, and having that conversation, and allowing people to check you and check them to get to that greater good.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the reason why we pointed out that we have very homogenous friend groups, right? Most white people don't have any black friends at all. And a lot of black people don't have any friends that aren't black. And that happens because of policies that none of us had, like the three of us weren't living when these policies were implemented, but we are benefited or disadvantaged now because of them. And we're all disadvantaged, I guess you could say, in the makeup of our friend groups, right? I think if you ask people, why are all your friends white? You would never say, like, because I don't like black people. It would just be like, they're the people that I went to school with, right? But that has to do with housing segregation, or and so it is kind of awkward. Even when I ask my students who they go to college and they're like, it's the time to learn and the time to meet new people, and then they still have like all white friends, or and they're just like, it's awkward. Well, of course it's awkward. If you lived in a small town, it's okay.
Yeah.
Try to do something that you haven't done before. Talk to someone. You have ties that have nothing to do with race. You are in the same class. You live in the same dorm. I like your sweater. I don't know. There are ways that we can broach interracial friendships that may, open us up to having these conversations more frequently and deeply, right?
Yeah, I think it's funny when I went to Emerson College. I don't know if you guys know Emerson at all, but I went to Emerson in Boston, and how I was allowed to leave the nest was a whole other story. My cousin had to beg my parents to cut the umbilical cord so I could live at school 6 miles away. But I remember when I moved in and it was just complete shock. I mean, there were people with different color hair, like blue hair, piercings everywhere, different. I was seeing a whole new world. And at first you're like, what's going on? This is not what I'm used to seeing. And then you're like, oh, this is so cool, actually. And you get to, and that's like the cool thing about college, I feel like. If you get to go to a diverse enough college, you get to learn and hear and see and feel and touch all different kinds of cultures and all kinds of different people and just, and that's why, I love traveling too. I love going, and my work as a journalist, I got to go all over the world. I've been in all kinds of places. And so, it's so important to have different kinds of friends. And it just isn't just, skin color. It's everything, it's every size, age. And that's what I love about AfterBuzz and all of our networks, BHL, Popcorn Talk, all of them, is when you come to one of our holiday parties, it is, first of all, the most fun thing ever, but you get to see everything. And it makes me so proud. And we've been doing this, we've been doing this for 10 years. And one of the proudest things I can say, and I was even having the realization yesterday on the show with James, is because of different things I experienced in the business, wanted to have a safe haven for hosts to build their careers and to be nurtured and to be able to make mistakes and be loved and supported and, shift and help them rather than just throwing them away because they made a mistake, which is what happens a lot. And one of my proudest accomplishments with AfterBuzz, and Kevin, of course, being the leader, is that you can be any age, size, color, gender, everything, non-gender, whatever it is, you can be anything and come in there. And it's given us so much because we're constantly learning and we're constantly growing. But, when you don't have that, you can't know better. You can't be better. And so I want to know a little bit more about the segregation, right? Because when you hear segregation, people are like, well, that's not a thing. Like, everyone's free. So how do you explain that to people?
So can I just go back to a thing that you just said, is that in this this group that you have with all of the different kinds of people, is that you can tell me, you're a journalist, and so like you talk to people, mm-hmm. right? And you're not expecting to learn from them just by sitting next to them, right? You don't learn by osmosis. And so I think one of the things that we get a little tricky about is that people somehow, I don't know how this happened, but it's kind of like, oh, well, if I show up in a diverse place, I'm going to learn something. But if you don't, as you know, right, if you're not talking, mm-hmm. engaging with, learning from, and contributing to, yep. then it's a moot point, right? So I think it's important just to highlight the effort that has to go into building those relationships. They don't just happen, and you don't just learn by being there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just, that inspired that rant right there. Segregation. So we tend to think about kind of like black bathrooms, white bathrooms, and that is totally illegal. But in the 19, there are these maps called HOLC Maps. If you get bored, just Google HOLC Maps and then your city. And these maps have different colors: red, green, blue, yellow. And the green areas were kind of like up and coming white middle class neighborhoods. And the yellow ones were kind of like maybe declining neighborhoods. And the red ones were largely Black neighborhoods. The federal government created these maps for major metropolitan cities. So if you live in New York, Pittsburgh, Philly, DC, Charlotte, LA. Yeah, all of the major ones. You look and you'll see these maps. And I bet you $1,000 and an invitation to your next party that if you look at the map, you would find where you live, and then you can find where you live, and it probably has the same makeup that it did in 1940.
Wow.
So,
I'm looking at a map of LA right now. Our team just pulled it up. So Stephen, that big red circle area, what is that?
So that's east of Culver City and north of Maywood. So I'm trying to figure out, it doesn't have it all
It'd be
labeled.
like Baldwin Hills, Inglewood, probably,
Yeah.
which, I mean, historically, yes. And
Baldwin
still,
Hills, it's a
yeah.
And you see that Beverly Hills is all green, but then you go down to Venice and it's all red.
Yeah.
And then you get further
that's
to
a that's
Hawthorne.
that's a perfect description of the demographic you just gave us, in someone who lives in this city. That's
yeah.
precisely.
So that map was like maybe late 1930s, 1940s. So what that map did is to say banks can give loans, federally backed loans, to the green and the like maybe blue areas, but we're not giving them to the red areas. And so, and people areas could own their homes, build wealth, pass that down, and the people in the red areas could not own their homes and could not pass their wealth. And so we can see, right, like red areas are also now becoming gentrified, right? But anyway, so this policy leads to, has given us 70 years of segregation. So it didn't really have anything to do with, I'm a racist, or, I don't want to live over there, I want to live over here. It also has to do with, well, my family gave me a home or passed down intergenerational wealth, and now I can live in Beverly Hills, but my family passed down intergenerational debt, so I'm going to live in the red areas. So it's a thing that has just happened. Like, we don't need anyone to be mean. We don't need anyone to be intentionally racist for this same policy that happened in the 1930s and 40s to shape the way we live, work, where we go to school, where all of that now. So
it's like hidden segregation.
That's one answer about segregation.
So it's like secret segregation.
That is systemic racism.
Wow. So I want to really understand this. In those red areas today, in 2020, homes are not able to be passed down?
Well, what I mean is that those homes, that people couldn't get loans to buy their homes. So most of your wealth is in your home.
Yeah.
Right? Most people's wealth is in their home. So imagine, like if your grandparents die, they'd like give the house to somebody else in the family, or they sell it and then you split the wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can imagine that if you couldn't buy your home, you were always renting, or if you couldn't get a federally backed loan and you got a shady loan with really high interest rates, if you miss a payment, you're out of there. You've lost everything that you ever had. So even just kind of in the way that state policies and federal policies dictated who could get a solid low income, low interest rate, influence who could buy homes in the first place. So if you couldn't get a good loan, you couldn't buy. And you couldn't get a good loan if you lived in the red neighborhood. And then also at some time, you couldn't live in a green neighborhood if you were Black. So we can see how the things that get passed down over generations, right, would get passed down to white folks, and fewer things would get passed down to Black folks, right? So you could also probably Zillow, right? The average cost of a home in Beverly Hills versus the average cost of a home in one of the red neighborhoods, right? And so just imagine if someone just died and passed on their home to the next generation. Your kids did not work for that money. They didn't do anything except be your kid. And then they got that thing, right? So, that's how that works. Or I'll give you another example. there's a really good study about the same map. And if you think about where the trees are planted, so maybe if you do like a Google search of the, like you can do a street image, that a lot of trees were planted in the green neighborhoods and not in the red neighborhoods, which now means that the red neighborhoods are hotter, have more pollution, people are more likely to have asthma, and the green neighborhoods have all that good clean air. They probably don't have, like trash, like garbage, place where you put trash, incinerators, that kind of thing. That was also dictated by those maps, which still influences how people live and work today.
Wow. So is it safe to say, or is it true, that in the red areas, if you want to get a loan, that you're going to get a different kind of interest rate than the greener areas?
Yes.
Like a significant difference?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So remember when Wells Fargo had to pay all that money out
Mm-hmm.
after the Great Recession and all of that, because they were giving those bad loans to.
Oh yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
The housing bubble that popped years ago.
Oh, 2008.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a lot of Black and brown people who like wanted to buy a home in the neighborhood that they have always lived, then end up getting bad loans with really high interest rates and bad terms. And they lost any of the wealth that they ever had, right?
Yeah.
So the housing,
still, those dictate how people get their loans now.
Yeah.
So Maria, what redlining did on another level too is that not only did it push people to those where they couldn't own land, but it also created kind of a whirlpool feeling of anyone who has any kind of criminal history or who has to file for bankruptcy are only able to move into those areas. So it further lessens the value of the property, and it further lessens the ability of people to go to school safely, and it raises the crime rates in those areas as well. So redlining is a very huge issue that has long-lasting effects. And the housing bubble did not help at all, because what it did was it gave people the opportunity to own these homes, but with really stringent rules around it that changed after deadlines. Usually you get a 30-year mortgage rate and you can say, I'm going to pay this for 30 years. A lot of these loans had different things that said, this is going to change.
Yeah, adjustable rates.
Yeah, adjustable rates. And after 10 years, it turns into this. And after 20 years, it turns into this. And it also had a lot of adjustable rates that were based on the value of the property around it. So if they go into, let's say, Venice, and they start gentrifying Venice, your mortgage rate that was $1,000 a month, based on the value of the commercial property within 3 blocks of you, could go up to $1,500 to $2,000 a month without any notice.
Does this all ring true?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So if we think about, right, then if most of that bad stuff was going to Black and brown people, and most of the good loans were going to white folks, that is systemic racism.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do we fix that? Is it really just voting? It doesn't seem like that's necessarily the answer, but what is the way?
Yeah. So, I mean, part of the issue is that a lot of the things that we see has to do more with wealth than anything else. And so if there is a way to close the wealth gap, then we could close a lot of other problems. That's like, it's kind of like, it's one of those policies that we know would work, but no one wants to do. Like school integration. We all know that if kids went to integrated schools, then resources would be more evenly distributed and all kids would be better off, but nobody wants to do that. So it's a similar thing. If we could close the wealth gap, we could solve a lot of problems.
Got it. Can you speak on defunding the police?
Sure, yeah. So I think I was thinking about this yesterday. and thinking about how 4, 5, 6 years ago, when people said Black Lives, right now we have like conservatives who are like, yeah, Black Lives Matter. And like 6 years ago, or even 2 weeks ago, they would have said like Black Lives Matter is anti-police and this and that and the other. And now people are coming around to that, coming around to wanting to know what it means and having a better understanding of what Black Lives Matter means and what the effort is about. And I think defunding the police is going to go through a similar set of life trials. Because upon hearing it, it sounds like get rid of the police or don't provide funding for the police or squeeze them so small that we can drown them. That's what defunding sounds like. It's a communication issue. What people who are talking about defunding the police are talking about is shifting some of the funds that we give to police to other experts who can deal with issues that police are often called for but have no training to deal with. For example, there's this really great episode of This American Life called like Losing My Mind or Losing My Damn Mind. I hope I can say that word. That's in the title. Okay. And it's about the Black who's having a manic attack. Like I think he's schizophrenic. And he ends up in the hospital. He's naked and the nurses want him to go back in. He's having this, he's just freaking out. And someone calls the police and they end up shooting him in his hospital room. And so all the doctors and nurses are like, okay, we just wanted your help a little. We, like all of us doctors and nurses and mental health professionals, we might get hit every once in a while by our patients, but we don't shoot them. And so in that moment, we see that the police were not trained to deal with a mental health situation, right? Similarly to a man that was killed by police here where I live in State College last year, that police aren't equipped for that. Maybe we could have sent in a mental health specialist instead. Or another example, I lived in North Carolina last year I lived in North Carolina, and there was a raccoon in my trash can. So my husband goes out with his gun because he's also from North Carolina and that's what they do, I guess. And so he's like, I need to deal with this raccoon. And so he calls the animal control people. There's a raccoon in my yard. I could shoot it, but it might be rabid. Someone needs to come and get it. Maybe you can tranquilize it and come and get it and move it to someplace safe for the raccoon. But who shows up? The sheriff. Why did the sheriff show up to deal with the raccoon when there's a whole other agency, animal control, that could have done it, right? And it's probably because animal control doesn't have the resources that it needs, and that if you had given enough resources to animal control, then the police wouldn't have had to come. So we can think of all these kinds of situations where police show up because the people who are really needed aren't funded enough, right? So might we think about changing the funding structure of police departments so that the money that we need to go to the police, go to the police, and then how can we think of public safety in other ways? Do people need food? Do people need housing? Do people need mental health services? If we gave them these things, then would we need to call the police? And if we didn't need to call the police, then would we need to give them the same budget? That's what defunding the police is really about.
Yeah. So Jeff, I gave you an article and I don't have it in front of me, so I might need your help to pull it up, please. Yeah. Because you just have the Natalie stuff here, which is not what I'm really interested in. I'm really interested in all the examples of defunding the police. Why I wanted to go over this is because I feel like everyone was so quick to judge defund the police, and everyone instantly, and we all have fear, right? Like that's just us as humans. So it's like, oh no, no police on the streets. I remember we have fun clicking through all the different news channels at times. So we'll listen to Fox, we'll listen to CNN, we'll listen to NBC, and we'll listen to everybody. And on Fox, it was like, I think it was like Tucker Carlson who's like, who are you going to call when something bad is happening? And I'm like, oh my God, that's what this is about? We're going to get rid of the police? And so I started instantly realizing, I'm like, okay, we don't know what this is about. How can we judge something and have an opinion on something? We don't know anything. No one has sat down to actually read or understand what the intention is behind this. And so I was looking and looking online, and I found this piece that really explained, just like on a maybe 20,000 foot view, like a quick understanding of it, that it wasn't about removing the police. It was about, because quickly people started citing an example of a city that didn't have a police department, and how, they had no crime and how everything was great and all of this. And I was like, interesting. And I likened it to, early in my career, I did a story on, I think it's Darien, Connecticut. In Darien, Connecticut, I'm sure you guys don't know, but they have teen paramedics. There are no EMTs there, but teenagers. They are trained. They're in high school. They've got, their pagers or whatever, cell phones now. And teenagers show up with a chaperone, and they are the ones that handle all of the emergency calls in that city. It's really cool. So I was like, okay, at first I was like, well, maybe it'll be something like that. Okay, well, it's working there in that capacity, and it's working in this other city. But then I found this article that explained it. And Jeff, have you pulled it up?
Yeah, I can read this quote. It's really echoing a lot of what Candis is saying, but law enforcement should not be the first responder for mental health crises. They should be the first responders for drug and alcohol abuse. There are a significant number of public health crises that law enforcement are forced to be the first responders to, but should not be. We should actually reallocate those dollars and give them back to the community. So it's echoing a lot of, I think, the points that Candis so beautifully brought up earlier.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was anything else in there. I think it was also, it explained maybe the positions that could be created, but like you said, like a mental health division, and it makes sense, right? It makes sense to have people that are trained. I saw a post on social media from a hairdresser I know who said something like, and don't hold me to the numbers, but they were this extreme. She's like, I had to put 2,000 hours in to get licensed. A cop has like 400 hours or 450. And so I have a friend who's former Secret Service who has always talked to us about the need for greater training for the local law enforcement, because they just don't have the training, even for them being able to carry a weapon, right? The level of training that they have to be able to carry a weapon is much, much different. So forget all of these other things, right? So it made a lot more sense to me in that moment, because everyone instantly wants to create their own narrative so that they can be right and that they can have their thing. And I really thought that with this show, I wanted to understand different things that we're all talking about, different key words, different key, things, so that we can understand better. Because when we that's our tagline on the show: when you know better, you get better. And so I think that's a really helpful thing for people to understand better. Obviously, it's a big topic right now.
Yeah. Another example that I think might ring some people's ears is if we think about when there's police in school, but not school counselors. So, I think that's in the same line, that we want our kids to be healthy. And are we expecting, there's a lot of things that can happen bad in schools, but wouldn't we rather have more counselors than more policing, right? Than more metal detectors or whatever else, right? When kids are at school.
I was quite moved myself. I recently saw a clip with Senator Kamala Harris, and the way she described her notion behind defunding the police. She says defunding the police is reimagining how public safety in America works. We've confused the idea to achieve safety, you put more police on the streets. It's actually a reinvestment into the community. And I think I think that sums up what you're saying, Candice, that it's about investing into, domestic violence intervention, mental health help. Myself, I grew up, luckily there was a Boys and Girls Club that was in my neighborhood that, I was never into anything nefarious, but nonetheless, I had outlets. I think doing things like that, making small business loans available for people, those things can solve the problem at the source. So I think that, like you said, when people hear defund the police, it's almost like they hear dismantle the police.
Mm-hmm.
We understand and we appreciate the importance of the police, but you don't need one. In Los Angeles, the budget was at $1.8 billion. Imagine taking 1% of that, $1.8 million, and setting up a Boys and Girls Club in Hollywood. That's a very easy thing, and it can have a lasting impression for generations. And it costs 1% of Los Angeles County's allocation for police funds.
Yeah, I think half of LA County's budget goes to policing.
54%.
Wow. Yeah. And is that for their salaries, or is that,
yes.
What are the other programs? I'm confused.
I
don't know.
A lot of the allocation of funds for the police have gone, and this to me, this is what makes it sting that much more. How often do we hear a police officer takes a Black life and they're put on administrative leave? That administrative leave that they're paid for comes out of our tax dollars. So this inflated budget is going to, almost foster the thing in which we're fighting. So it goes to salaries, overpayments, administrative leave. I understand the importance of having equipment and things like that, but again, Los Angeles, $1.8 billion, that seems like a lot. 54% of our allocated funds in our city goes to police officers, and yet we experience things like this on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that money issue, for me, so much of your budget, even your home budget, tells about your values, right? And so if half of your budget is going to policing, what does that say about your values? How much does the average teacher in LA get paid? I'd be curious to know.
That was the first thing I thought of, actually, because I saw online someone posted salaries, and I was like, wow, I didn't realize they made that much money. And listen, they're putting their lives on the line. So it's not about that. It was just about the discrepancy between them and teachers was the first thing I thought of. So, yeah. and in normal non-COVID days, teachers are now having to be police officers and have to keep their students safe, unfortunately, in the school shooting era. Yeah. I think I have to ask Candis before we wrap up, what have we missed? And I know there's so much, but is there something big that we may have missed in this discussion? Because I flow. And so we've kind of flowed, but I'm like, is there anything big that we've missed? And I also have to say that I don't want this conversation to end today. And I really hope that we can have more of these conversations as more things come to light and more things are needed. So, I'm committed to the discussion. And so it doesn't all have to happen today, but if there's something big that I've missed that is very important today to get across to people and educate them on, please let me know.
I think sometimes when we hear all of this, it becomes very daunting and you almost feel like there's nothing that you can do, or you feel a sense of paralysis. And to that, I think it's important to say that everyone can do something. It could be big, it could be small, it could be something in their home. It could be from, making sure that the books in your home have brown people in the characters for your little kids, to making sure that you vote. So it's those small elections, those little ones, that's where that happens for referendums and budget, that local budget stuff. That happens in those little elections, not in the big presidential 4-year ones. And so no election is too small. So I guess I would say that we can all do little small incremental things in our lives that would aggregate up and make big changes over time.
Can I ask one more quick question before we go to Maria? Is that okay?
Yeah.
I mentioned this to you on our pre-interview yesterday, Candis, but there's a lot of, white people right now who probably are having profound realizations about the own microaggressive racism in their life, and they want to make change, and even, they may feel compelled to reach out to their Black friends for support, but they don't want to make it about their Blackness. if that's an okay way for me to phrase this. Like, I'm trying to phrase this tactfully, but I'm wondering how how white people and white allies can support the Black community right now without a sense of obligation or guilt, and just, be supportive. I don't know if that's a fair question.
Well, it's also kind of what James said earlier, even when you read your post, like, don't reach out to me. It will feel contrived right now.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, that's a good post.
Thank you.
Did you hear his post? Did you hear him read his post?
I did. I mean, I just learned everything about it just right now.
Oh, okay.
So I was thinking about this, Jeff, and I was thinking, one, that most white people don't have Black friends, but if you did, then it's not like doing anything different from being a friend, right? But if it's about a Black neighbor or a Black coworker, well, then things get a little different.
Yeah.
But I guess I would say this: people should simply acquaint themselves with the facts so that they can be prepared to deal with the problems that we see in an intelligent way, in an efficient way, and in a humane way. I stole that from a book from 1940, Montagu. But I think it's important to just kind of shift out of this moment of guilt and just do your best to learn more, and, like Maria says, do better.
Great. Thank you.
I love it. Well, when we do know better, we do get better, or we have the chance to get better. And I do believe we are better together. And we talk on the show all the time about how we're all connected, right? And so just like you said earlier, like, all lives can't matter if Black lives don't. And so, Candis, thank you so much for taking the time to help us today and to share. And James, you're as wonderful as Kevin says, and even more. And I'm really grateful, Candis, that you took this time. I don't have where we can find you, so let everybody know where they can find you on social and your books as well.
So you can tweet me at Prof. Candis. You can buy Stay Woke at NYU Press or any place you get books.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and nice to meet you both.
Of course. We will see you again soon, I hope.
I hope.
Okay, fantastic. James, what do you think?
That was everything I thought it would be, and more. I did quite a bit of research on the doctor. I know she wants me to call her Candis, but my mom taught me better.
Wait, so Jeff said that she's not a doctor.
I've been looking online, and different sources are saying different things. I should have let you know, James. She loves to be intro just as Candis, so I probably should have let you know that in advance. But
okay. Well, yeah. I want to make sure I have the right information, so I'm not disrespectful and not, someone went to school for that many years to be called a doctor. If she's a doctor, then I should have called her a doctor. I was like texting him like, Jeff, is she a doctor? And he's like, no. And I'm like, what?
Her website says she has her MA, so I think
what's MA?
Master's. I don't know if that's
a doctorate.
Yeah,
I know her handle says, she said Dr. Candis.
Prof Candis, I think.
Prof Candis.
Yeah,
okay,
Professor Candis Smith. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, nobody meant anything bad, so we'll leave it at that. But yeah, I think that was really important, because I really want people to watch this and realize that jumping to conclusions doesn't really help anything or anyone, including yourself. Right?
Absolutely.
Any final thoughts, James?
No, I just want to thank you for this opportunity, and really, I guess my final thought would be just the underlying current is communication. I firmly believe that, there are a few problems in this world that can't be solved with communication. So, again, take that opportunity with your friends, with your family, get uncomfortable, have those conversations, because our silence is what put us in the mess we're in right now. So again, the only way to get out of it is communication.
I love it. James, thank you so much. You can find James where?
You can find me on Instagram at Terrell James Maple, and on Twitter at James Maple Actor as well.
And I encourage you to watch his I Love You, James series, and read his incredible articles. at AfterBuzz TV, BHL, everywhere. Put those in the summary as well. And thank you for your contributions there.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Be nice people, make good choices, and be present.